Well, everybody knows that private institutions are for profit. Their focus never will be on service, especially service to the common man, but how to make more profit. Any institution you can take, let it be banks, let it be educational institutions, let it be hospitals. Private sector is always looking for more and more of profit, whereas a public sector is created for the purpose of serving the society at large. Today the concern in our country among the bankers, among the general public, the customers, the farmers, the women is that the banking sector is moving towards privatization, because different people in the government as well as RBI repeatedly keep talking about privatization. Privatization is not going to help this country as a whole. For example, banking sector after independence as well as before independence by and large was only with the private sector. Between 1947 and 1969, on an average every year, almost 35 banks collapsed. The customers were not getting their money back. Number two, that period, the banking sector was only serving the industrial houses, because banks were owned by industrialists. So they were only mobilizing the common man's deposit and using it for their own business purposes. That's why Dr. R.K. Hasari, who was a planning commission member that time, had given a report to the parliament in which he had stated that unless the clutches of the business houses from the banking system is removed, banking sector cannot serve the larger masses of the country. This was one of the major reasons for nationalization. Similarly, if you see the credit availability, in 1967, hardly 2% of the total loans given was given to the farmers. The legendary economist Dr. Malcolm Darling had made a statement that a farmer in this country is born on debt, lives on debt, and dies on debt, because they were totally dependent on the money lenders and the banking sector was not giving them credit. Similarly, the artisans, small industries, they could not mobilize funds for their growth of their respective industry, and they were all dependent on the money lenders. That is the purpose for which nationalization was brought in. And after nationalization, we have seen very clearly that the credit services have gone to the common man. There was a famous program called Integrated Rural Development Program, IRDP, through which crores of ordinary people got credit, and that helped the economy to grow. It generated employment. Similarly, there was another scheme called it still exists, Lead Bank scheme, under which the country was directed that every block headquarters should have a bank branch. And today we have branches in interior places like Andamans, Nagaland, where I have worked. There is a branch called Sangsanyu, where it is a block headquarters, but the population there is hardly 300. Still, the bank has been serving there for years together, and that is helping the economy, that is helping the farmers there. Similarly, in Arunachal Pradesh, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi went and opened a branch in a place called Anini, which could be reached only by road, traveling by foot for 3.5 days. He came by helicopter and inaugurated it. So that is the kind of development which has taken place in the interiors. Second thing is, you look at the credit deposit ratio. There are states which had been complaining, and there are few states even now complaining, that the deposits mobilized by the banks from that particular state is not given as loan in that state, but it is going elsewhere. That was the situation earlier before 1969, most of the deposits were collected from rural semi-urban areas, whereas the credit was given more in the urban areas, in the metropolitan areas. Now after nationalization, that has changed. The credit deposit ratio, that is what percentage of deposit you have collected is given as loan in that particular area, it has tremendously improved. Especially even in the backward states, so-called backward states, the credit availability has increased, and various studies are showing that because of this, there has been growth in agriculture, there has been growth in small industries, there has been tremendous growth in employment opportunities. So, talking about privatization in this country is not at all correct. India is still a developing country. After 70 years of independence, we are still having 26% of our people as illiterate. Only 20% of our children go for higher education. Healthcare by and large is now in the private sector. And in this country, if a real growth has to take place, especially for the larger majority, instead of this minuscule minority, the banking system has to remain in the public sector. They have to be encouraged to give more credit to the common man. See, people talk about targeted credit. Narasimham Committee started this discussion after 1991, where they were saying that banking is a business. Now the Prime Minister of the country also has made a statement once or twice in some meetings that government has no business to be in the business. Government cannot look at it like that. Banking is not just a mere business. Banking is also a service. Banking also has an orientation towards development of the country at large. So for that, directed lending is needed. Earlier, the priority sector lending targets were very strict. 18% of the total credit was targeted to agriculture. 40% of the total credit was targeted towards priority sector. But subsequently, after 1991, the government made changes in these policies. Though the priority sector still exists, they have been diluted. Diluted in such a way that any allied agriculture is also considered as agriculture lending. For example, you are giving loan to a company which is processing water, making this potable waters, which is like Bisleri and all. Even that will be considered as an allied agriculture. Huge farms like Ambani has Alfonsa farms, which is used only for export, thousands of acres. That is also considered as a priority sector because it is allied agriculture. So that norms have been diluted. Similarly, in the case of housing loan, even huge housing loans are given as priority sector. So that way, what has happened is the small credit has got reduced. Here, what the government has to change the course of direction, and what people have to demand is that public sector should really support the public. Today the policies have changed because of which public sector is being forced to support the corporates more. For example, 11,643 borrowers who have a credit limit more than 100 crores have got total loan of 38% as on last year.